Toy Story is one of the most iconic animated franchises ever put to screen. In 1995, Pixar dropped an animated film that changed the game for good. It was the first computer-generated animated film. Over the years, we have seen countless sequels towards this IP in the last few years, so people can relive this series. So in this video, we are going to dive deep into the Toy Story franchise. We will go film by film, all from the Pitch Perfect trilogy, the unnecessary cash grab of Toy Story 4, and the generic mess of Lightyear. But of course, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like the videos so you don't miss future uploads. But this is the good and the bad of the Toy Story franchise. It is crazy to think about that. It has been 30 years since the first movie dropped. Normally, I like to address multiple themes from the plot of the film. For this film, a different approach is needed. Because to be honest, the biggest themes for me are in two words: friendship and acceptance. In fact, I would argue that is what this whole series is about. It's a film layered in those themes that make it such a great watch every time. We see Andy for the first time playing with Woody and the gang. You really see the connection he has with these toys that bleeds into the entire narrative. It's not just that though, we also see how Andy favorites Woody and how that has affected him. We even hear the now iconic "You Got a Friend in Me" by Randy Newman, which is key to this film because it symbolizes what the toys really mean, as they are Andy's friends. In an era where Disney movies were really mainly musicals, Toy Story used it in a different way. Even when Woody's life changes, you hear a different song. The meaning is story driven all the way through. In general, I think Woody is a character who is selfish, in this movie at least. Having Tom Hanks voice the character just made it so much better. Woody is basically that one dude who gets favoritism but ultimately has to learn his lesson the hard way. Let's be honest, Woody in this film, he isn't a good person. A better way to show what I mean is, let's take a look at when Buzz arrives. The toys see Woody under the bed and asks if he's been replaced, and he says no. This tells us a lot because it's a bit of foreshadowing about what's to come. Anyway, Woody goes up to the bed and meets Buzz for the first time, and we see a toy who actually thinks he is a space ranger. We see him one-up Woody in every way that shows plenty of jealousy from Woody. We then see a montage of everything Woody loves being replaced. Woody was so occupied that he never thought of what could be. He begins to see his entire life turn upside down. This is something that the film does really well. It shows us as the viewer how Woody is struggling to accept what is happening. It shows us as the viewer how Woody is struggling to accept what is happening. You really see just how selfish Woody is the moment he kicks Buzz out of that window by mistake, which for this version was absolutely nothing. In one of the original versions, Woody was meant to do that. Like I said, Woody is not a good person at all. He is a favoritism brat and goes on a journey of self-acceptance. This is what I mean about Woody. He isn't a perfect character, but is a really flawed character. Not in a way where he's morally complex, but in a way where he's just a selfish favorite who gets everything he wants. And now he has to learn how to accept new things. Tom Hanks delivers this level of arrogance, but also bravery that the character needed. But let's turn our focus over to Buzz, because it isn't just Woody who goes on a journey. Buzz still believes he is the real Buzz Lightyear, but in reality, he is just a toy. He thinks he can fly and shoots lasers. Tim Allen really deserves a lot of credit here. He plays that side so well, that heroic figure, but also the one who realizes who he is and becomes more vulnerable. After being pushed out of a window, Buzz then starts a fight with Woody. But in the process, the two get stuck at a gas station. The two then argue, and you really see the difference between the characters. Woody knows who he is, but Buzz doesn't. It's why Woody yells at Buzz and tells him he is a toy, not a space ranger. Once at Sid's house, we see both Buzz and Woody try to escape, but Woody's string pulls on the rail and the dog hears it, so they have to hide. It's here where Buzz sees a commercial around himself. Once he sees this, he starts questioning everything about himself. Even when he sees not a flying toy, he is in a delusional state. Buzz then hits his low point and decides to see if he can actually fly or not. But then when he tries, he falls down and realizes who he is. Woody was right about him all along. Buzz just works so well because he is basically like the fish out of water character in this film. While the rest of the toys know who they are, he still believes he is a space ranger. Him watching that commercial isn't just a scene, it's the moment he discovers who he is and now accepts who he is. The themes of acceptance don't just apply to the friendship of Buzz and Woody, but also to themselves. Before Sid wakes up to blow up Buzz, we get one of the best scenes of the entire film, where Woody and Buzz finally learn to accept each other. Both admit their problems and put aside their differences, working together to get back to Andy. But just when they get out, it's too late. Sid woke up and the plan is in motion. So just like Woody teamed up with Buzz, he decides to work alongside Sid's toys. He accepts them just as he accepts Buzz. A big part of this movie is acceptance, and you clearly see it in both scenes perfectly. They get a plan together to take down Sid and save Buzz. This is incredibly satisfying for so many reasons, because let's be real, Sid deserves it. He is a spoiled brat, he got what he deserved. The plan works, so Woody and Buzz run towards the moving van. When Woody and Buzz are stuck in the middle of the road, once they get the rocket off, you really see so much development. Woody took on traits from Buzz, and Buzz did the same. And when they get back in the van, they both wink at each other. You really see how much they have learned to accept each other and become friends. After this, we get an epilogue where the toys are getting Christmas toys. We see them doing the same thing they got at the beginning, and now Buzz is worried, just like Woody was at the beginning of the movie. Now, before I get into Toy Story 2, I want to discuss some of the other characters in this film. While Woody and Buzz are the main characters, that is not to say this film doesn't have other great characters. I love what they did with Bo Peep and her scenes with Woody, with some really dark humor moments. Toy Story is just utter perfection. Each time you watch it, it gets better and better. It is layered in its themes that carry throughout the entire film. 30 years later, and people still talk about this film to this day. If that doesn't tell you this film didn't age well, I don't know what will. Now, the background around Toy Story 2 is really interesting. The film at one point was going to be a direct-to-video film. Even at some point, the entire film got deleted but was saved thanks to Galen Suzman, but then got fired after the failure of Lightyear. Say what you will about Disney using Toy Story so much, but they don't do these sequels for no reason. John Lasseter, who directed the first Toy Story, actually said seeing a kid playing with Woody changed things. He wanted to make the movie for that kid as he knew it was more than his. He wanted to respect the original, with the idea coming from wondering what would happen if a toy was upsetting. How would that toy feel not being played by a child? That concept became Toy Story 2. But getting into the actual film itself, Toy Story 2 is simply incredible. That is the thing with this series. You got a pitch perfect animated trilogy, then the rest is basically DLC more than anything. With some good, and some bad. This film had a difficult task to live up to, but it did it really well. One thing this film does better than the first Toy Story is emotion. The emotion you feel in this thing is just a whole new level. That scene where Jessie looks back on her past is just heartbreaking. It tricks the viewer into making us feel bad for letting go of our toys. Not to mention, hearing that music in the background makes it so much worse in the best possible way. One thing Woody does in this film is he goes through a cycle of emotions. When questioning about Andy, he has a talk with Stinky Pete. He says that Andy is growing up, and by then he will be nothing. And love him or hate him, he isn't wrong, and we see that in the next film. But Woody realizes he wouldn't miss that for the world. We also see Woody find out who he is. He goes through a similar journey that Buzz went in the first movie. That scene where he sees all that merch in the intro to his show conveys the same development as when Buzz sees the commercial. Again, it's the moment Woody discovers who he really is. He knows he's a toy, just not where he comes from. He is the opposite of Buzz in the first movie. The same goes for Buzz. He, Rex, Potato Head, Slinky, and Ham all go out to find him. You really see just how far they have come since. He learned so much from Woody. Even when he finds Woody to get him back, you see how Woody has changed since then, but Buzz has changed because of Woody. It's why these characters work so well. They're so different, but work so well together, and opposites attract. Away from the story, we get introduced to some brand new characters, including Jessie, Bullseye, the three aliens, Mrs. Potato Head, Stinky Pete, and of course, Buster. For a lot of these characters, you feel for them, even if some don't get a lot of screen time. Specifically with Jessie, like I said, that scene with her being left behind, it's a scene that's pure emotion and tragedy. Jessie just wants to be seen again out of the box. She's afraid that no kid will ever like her again, but thanks to Woody, she decides to go. What I also find interesting is that there is a theory that Andy's mom was her owner, and yeah, I can definitely see that. Now, the other characters, I will say the rest aren't used as much. Bullseye is just adorable, and I can't hate him. Same goes for Buster. The three aliens get introduced in the last few minutes and become the Potato Head kids. Mrs. Potato Head is honestly a really loving person, and I like that. Overall, these are side characters, but they work well enough. But let's get into Stinky Pete. This was one of the first time Disney did a twist villain thing, and seeing it as a child was a total shock. He is just a dude who has never been played with and thinks it's evil. He just wants to go into the museum and get out of the box for good. He fails and now must learn the meaning of playtime. Overall, Toy Story 2 is an amazing film. It doesn't have many issues besides a few minor things, but if I'm being honest, they are so minimal that I just don't even care. This film was just a great film and continue the series in a fantastic way.
So long, partner. It was perfect. Perfect. Everything.
After Toy Story 2, the franchise went on break, so all hope was lost for Toy Story from that period between the second and the third film, until January 2006, when Disney bought Pixar and they hired Edward Cottonwell and John Lasseter, along with the brain trust of Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, Pete Docter, and Lee Erich, all of whom have been essential to Toy Story and Pixar's success throughout the years. Bob Iger wanted a new Toy Story film as soon as possible, so the team got to work. Toy Story 3 is simply the best Toy Story movie we have ever gotten. Not just that, but this is one of the greatest animated films of all time. It is in my top 3 in my ranking, just from top to bottom, it's perfect. This film ended the series in the best way it could, and it was great. Now, I mentioned earlier, the scene between Woody and Stinky Pete, since that mentioned Andy being older. In this film, Pixar decided to make Andy an adult about to go to college. The same thing Jesse went through is now happening to the entire gang. Being sick of not being played with, they go off to daycare, but that would be the worst decision they ever made. Now they must escape before Andy leaves for college. The gang are at a point where they are questioning if Andy even wants them anymore. The rest think Andy sent them off to the trash, but in reality it was Andy's mom. Andy even freaks out when he finds out, and it is horrible. Woody knows they belong at Andy's, so he leaves. We get a cool sequence of Woody running away from daycare, but it gets taken in by Bonnie, and it's here where Woody gets played with for the first time in years. He has a blast and realizes here that maybe getting away from Andy isn't the worst idea. With the help of Bonnie's toys, he finds Andy's house and it's right around the corner. But once he finds out what the daycare is up to, he goes back to save his friends. He and the gang realize something: they all belong together. That theme of friendship is still there. Regardless of the film, it is always there. Now, I'm skipping ahead a bit as I want to talk about the lots of stuff in the character part. So later on, he and the gang get put into the dump, like they would if they didn't escape. And they almost die, and it's here where we get an amazing scene. All of them start holding hands as if they are about to die. A lot of people think that toys are immortal, but I think this scene really shows otherwise. The gang then get back to Andy, and they all agree to go into the attic, but then we get an amazing scene again. It doesn't matter where he is. Andy will always be in his heart no matter what. He grew up, and it's time to move on. So Woody grabs a pen, writes Bonnie's address, and puts himself in the box with the gang. He knows he will miss Andy, but that's not where he belongs anymore. So when he arrives at Bonnie's and Andy sees Woody, and Andy's description of Woody is just pitch perfect. He is a brave and loyal friend who will never give up on anyone. So Andy lets go of Woody, knowing it is the right thing to do. The film then ends with Andy and Bonnie playing with the toys. The gang got what they wanted from another play session with Andy right before it ended. Bonnie waving goodbye to Andy was such a cherry on top. It is just the perfect ending. Andy's Toy Story is ended, but the gang's is still beginning. Of course, Bonnie's new toys work really well. They detail a lot about Woody and help him realize so many things. Even if they aren't used a lot, they are still really likable characters. We even get introduced to Ken and Barbie. Both have a love-hate relationship in this film, but Ken really goes through a great redemption arc because of Barbie. He realizes that Sunnyside can be a better place because of her, and he leads them into that direction. Barbie also is done really well. Not like a top character, but still really good. But I can't talk about the new characters without talking about Lotso Hugging Bear. This is one of the best animated movie villains I have ever seen. He is a monster. After losing a girl and getting replaced, his heart is broken and becomes soulless. He turns Buzz against his friends, locks the gang up in the butterfly room, even lets the toys in the dump to burn. He is a pure evil psychopath and one of the greatest animated movie villains of all time. But that's not the end. There's still more to come.
But why?
Oh boy. Here we go. Toy Story 4 is easily the main series' weakest entry. Now, I'm gonna switch it up. This time, we are gonna go from good, then we will go to bad. Starting with the good. I just gotta talk about the animation. Look, say what you will about this movie, but they nailed the animation of this film. It looks so real at times, it's a little bit scary to sit through. It is a visual feast to look at and it is a blast to watch. Let's not act like the story is bad. At least it is used in a new way. The idea of Woody being put on the sidelines and meeting a fork toy named Forky is a cool premise. That idea alone makes it really fun. The film also really tackles Woody and Bo Peep's relationship very well. Credit to where credit is due, they really go into that and it hits really hard. Like Woody going to save Bo and then letting her go, that is a real gut punch. Or when Buzz tells Woody to stay and after he gets flashbacks of what happened back then and he decides to stay, it is done really well. But for every good idea this film presents, there are plenty of flaws that bring it down in quality. When you look away from its story and themes, you are left with a film that is forced. That is why so many people don't like this film. It's the definition of a forced sequel. The third film ended things perfectly, so if you're going to do a sequel, it better have a reason. And while yes, the storyline around Bo and Woody does work, there is just as much that doesn't. The plot at times is just a total mess, with some issues that contradict the last film. The last film made it clear that the toys stick together. This film does away with that. It fails to continue that in a well enough way. It feels forced and at times is paper thin. But one of the strongest suits of the past entries were the new characters. This film is basically the complete opposite. The villain Gabby is painfully forgettable and the two plushies, I barely remember their names. Although Duke Kaboom, that was a fun side character. But for a franchise that thrived on new characters, this was the exact opposite. The new characters overall are average at best, and at worst, forgettable. Speaking of characters, with the returning characters, most are just completely sidelined. Even Buzz is reduced to having plot armor microphone talk to him. The only one that is not sidelined is Woody and Forky. That is it. The rest are just not used often, which is an absolute crime. However, none of that compares to the destruction of character arcs. So let's get into the most controversial part of this movie. Ending the film with Woody leaving Bo isn't a bad thing, but there is a major issue. It doesn't line up with the character. It makes zero sense to do this. Why would a character whose existence is to protect his family and friends just leaves? It doesn't make any sense at all. You could try and justify it by saying Woody's arc has been complete, so it's time for him to settle down. But even then, I just can't understand why Woody would leave all his friends for Bo. As we mentioned, despite Toy Story 4's flaws, it is still a solid to decent entry, at least in my opinion. But Lightyear is easily the worst installment in this franchise. It's not a bad film necessarily, but it is just a generic science fiction action blockbuster. This film had a lot of potential, but was completely wasted. People even thought after watching this film, Andy had terrible taste. That is just really sad. This film even became the first Toy Story film to bomb at the box office. Just think about that, is crazy. Granted, this was at a time when Bob Iger retired and he brought in Bob Chapek to run the show, and what he did to Pixar was just unforgivable. He let multiple great Pixar films go straight to streaming and it is still felt today. So while I am sympathetic to this film because of what Chapek did, it doesn't change how lazy this spinoff was. Lightyear is a film so fundamentally broken from top to bottom, I don't even know where to start. Now, just like Toy Story 4, let's go from positive to negative, even though the positives here are very slim at best. One thing the entire Toy Story franchise does each time better is its animation. I think this is something we all can agree on, at least to some degree. The animation looks even more real here than it normally does, mainly because it's not toys this time around, which helps a lot in its tone. The music as well is just stellar. Bringing in the brilliant Michael Giacchino for the score was a genius decision from Pixar because the music makes it feel epic. It is incredibly well done and feels like it belongs in a different movie. It is just phenomenal. The voice acting was also really well done. It's mainly Chris Evans though who holds the acting up. Even with some of the other characters, you get attached to them. Specifically Socks the cat, Alicia, and Izzy Hawthorne. Each of these characters you grow attached to them because of the relationship they have with Buzz. They are really well done, not perfect, but still really good. Thematically, Lightyear also has a lot going for it, and at times it really does nail those themes. The ideas around empathy, teamwork, and letting go when they hit, they really do. It does have a good message that in concept could work, but despite its few positives, in general, it just doesn't work. We mentioned how when its themes hit, it really does hit. But overall, it just falls completely to the wayside in its complexity. It wants to have its cake and eat it too, but fails to do either well. So let's rip off the band-aid with this one and let's talk about the gay romance with Alicia. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and call it woke because I hate that word, but in context of this film, it's so jarring. Yes, representation is great and all, but all it does is distract the audience on what this film is actually trying to do. And it doesn't even do anything for the story at all. We mentioned earlier how this is a generic film, and it is. Its storyline is so basic and lazy. If you took this film and removed the Toy Story IP, this is just a normal sci-fi adventure film. Which I don't mind, but when you tease Buzz's character having insane lore, you better use it. But they didn't. It just felt paint for numbers sci-fi film. With that generic paper-thin plot, the rest of the film is just boring. It treats itself seriously, but even fails at that. It lacks any real emotion and humor. The only real source of that is through the Hawthorns and Socks. Then there are the other characters who help defeat Zurg. They are so underwhelming, it's insane. The characters are lifeless, with performances so lazy, but none of that fails into comparison to what they did to Zurg. Now, I'm not one of those people that gets mad because this isn't Buzz's father. Guys, that was a joke towards Star Wars and nothing more. So that for me is not an issue. The issue with Zurg is he is just so underwhelming. He has solid motives, sure, but it is a lazy version. It reduces a character who has been in this franchise since the second film into a generic sci-fi villain with such a lackluster ending that makes the character feel shallow. They even had the gall to tease a post-credit scenes for a follow-up that, let's be honest, nobody wanted. This film didn't just get Zurg wrong, they didn't even try to get him right. Ultimately, Lightyear is just a generic, useless film that just shouldn't exist. It gets some things right for sure, but in the end, it just feels like a soulless blockbuster that failed more than it succeeded. So after revisiting these 5 films, we must ask the real question. With all the highs and all the lows out of the way, why is this franchise so special? And more importantly, why does it work? The franchise works because of one simple thing. The dynamic between these characters. When it strayed away from that with Toy Story 4 and Lightyear, it failed. But when all those themes come together, the franchise just works. It's why this series is so beloved. The trilogy leaned into that so heavily, it became the series' biggest strength. Focus on that element for every installment, including Toy Story 5, you are for sure to have a beloved film by the fans. When Toy Story first came out, it was a big deal. Steve Jobs purchased Pixar from Lucasfilm back in 1986. John Lasseter first worked with computer animation for the film Tron for Disney, and after a short called Tin Toy, which got him all of the faith in the world, Jeffrey Katzenberg got a deal with Pixar to make movies for them. The movie was pitched and became a juggernaut of entertainment. This led to Pixar where they are now for better or worse. Most of their films have given us so much joy throughout the years, and Toy Story is where it started. It is the most important animated film because of that. So after all these films, where does that leave us? Well, we are in a state of uncertainty, believe it or not. The trilogy is utter perfection, but it really went downhill a bit after Toy Story 4. Whether that changes or not, we won't know until Toy Story 5 drops. After all these years, Toy Story still makes a ripple in the industry for better or worse. With all of that said, the question is for you guys. What did you guys think of the Toy Story franchise? Whatever your thoughts are on this franchise, I would love to hear your opinions. But until next time, take care.